Welcome, everybody, to our another episode of Helping Brick and Mortar Businesses. We have an Alignable group called the Alignable Brick and Mortar Dojo, and I'm so excited to have our guest here, David Amerland, and you're in Greece right now.
So I am, yes.
And we're in Raleigh, North Carolina to talk about ChatGPT to help small, brick and mortar businesses. Good to have you here, David.
Likewise, I'm actually excited to talk about this because it appears very new, and in many ways it is in the way we use it, but in some ways it isn't, and we need to explore that.
Well, let's do a brief explanation for people who don't know what it is. And to me, It is a machine learning system that is a form, I'm trying to use non-jargon terms, that it is taking the information and generating an answer from interpreting what you're actually saying. So it's not like looking something up and trying to bring something back from a database. It's generative in real time. And that's, to me, so exciting. And so it's built on studying a very large amount of information and then tuning it into a machine learning system to get the core of the content.
Absolutely. I mean, well, you're absolutely right. It is essentially machine learning. Machine learning has been around for some time now, especially in search. Now, we must clearly define that this is a large language model system like ChatGPT 4 now, like Google's Bard, is not a search engine, right? This has to be actually defined. And we'll look at the difference. And essentially, if we sort of simplify the complexities, it has different hidden layers internally. They relate to each other and pass a value from one layer to the next according to the search query which we input. And they're designed to generate natural language sounding text. So it's almost like talking to a person. To some extent, they make the same choices, which is why it's so exciting. To some other extent, they do not, because they're also designed to not leave any gaps. So if they don't know something, they will absolutely make it up. And this is where the critical sort of junction begins to become important, right? So we need to keep this in mind.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I know some people that do that as well. So I'm just hoping AI is better than humanity, not equal to humanity. So... But yeah, and then in the brick and mortar and just playing with this, I did a simple system where I took two businesses I knew, a shoe store and a wine shop, and asked ChatGPT give some marketing ideas. And it was exciting to see. It wasn't rocket scientists or the most amazing thing ever, but they were good, fairly grounded ideas, many of which I had told them to do and they were doing.
Yes. Okay. And I think let's use your example now. What is it good for, right? What are we using it? Well, if we think that a model like ChatGPT, like Google's Bard, is trained on a massive set of text, which essentially is representational of knowledge, then it holds in store quite a large knowledge base in a way, and an ability to generate text that makes sense within certain parameters. So if you ask it to do something specific, like, for example, give me some marketing ideas for, let's say, a new product which I'm bringing to the market, and specify the product. And also, to make it even more interesting, specify the keywords which you want mentioned around the product. Because it holds that massive amount of data, it can become exceedingly good at actually generating very specific, very useful examples you can use very quickly. So it saves you a lot of time. It's a massively useful tool in that direction. And if we say, is it as good as a person? Well, the immediate answer is to say no, but is it as good as an average person? Yes, it is. Sometimes it can be a lot better. And I've tested it a few times with articles on fitness. And as we all know, articles on fitness can be very light and fluffy, or they can be very knowledgeable and in-depth. And I asked it to do very specific things. And it produced an article which was incredibly easy to read. It hit all the keynotes. And it reminded me of some of the articles I've seen in leading men's magazines, which talk about fitness, and they're written by journalists who are not fitness experts. So, you can replace them easily because it pulls from the same kind of knowledge. It creates the same semantic connections in the concepts, and it presents them in a very readable sort of a manner. So yeah, this is a classic example. If you want to write a blog post, for instance, which is not very deep because you don't know the subject, it'll do a fantastic job.
Well, the other thing I see is it can spur somebody who's, imagine you're running a store, maybe a shoe store, a wine shop, a chocolatier, where it might suggest things that are so obvious you've forgotten it. And that's what's been helpful to me, because I've been teaching small business marketing and coaching for a while and went, oh my gosh, I kind of left that piece out. So that's where it can give ideas. Now, one of the concerns that's important for people doing it is this is not a way to get free blog posts, because Google's already said, no, if you use this just for grabbing content and throwing it out there, we're on to you and we're going to downrate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all, or most of us, are familiar with the spinner articles of the past, right? If we go before 2005, 2007, the web was full of articles that seemed to make almost sense, but not quite. Okay, and you thought, what is this? And it's a kind of a very poor version of AI that we used to take a few paragraphs and sentences and regurgitate them in a manner that kind of produced an article that made very poor sense. It was obvious to spot. Okay, it was very low quality. And Google in search certainly penalized those articles, penalized the websites that used them. With generative AI like large language models, this becomes a harder task. And although it is relatively easy to spot right now, this will become harder and harder. And certainly in the last few weeks, the tests that have been run to spot the articles have been spotty. Sometimes they spot them 100%, sometimes they get through because they're that good, really. So would you use it for a blog post? I mean, I wouldn't suggest you copy and paste simply because you don't know if it's going to get caught out. But I would certainly take a blog post and enrich it a little bit, imbue a little bit of specialized knowledge, perhaps link it to other parts of your website, and then you have a ready-made article very quickly for relatively little effort. And I think that's where the tool itself becomes very useful. So do not copy and paste. No, but do take it, do use it, do enrich it, and just save yourself a little bit of time.
David, I've got one question. I mean, where in general have you seen business owners seeing the most success as far as incorporating AI to automate simple tasks that humans have conventionally done? Is there any surprising areas that you've seen, or anything unconventional or counterintuitive?
Yeah, there are a couple of a couple of businesses, and I can't remember now the specific ones, are using them as a 24/7 chatbot. And we know in the past, when it comes to customer service, chatbots draw from a knowledge base and can be very rigid and very frustrating to use, simply because they don't have severe limitations. But in this particular case, it was exceptionally good, and it was so good that when it reached the limit, it had been sort of triggered to basically say, okay, let me connect you to a person. So that's a classic example. That was really, really good. And I was quite surprised by how effortless it was to actually chat to the bot, knowing it's a bot, but it didn't feel that way. And when I pushed it and tested it and reached the end of its knowledge, it said, a person is going to contact you within the next hour. And they did, but that was just part of the test.
And did you say, no, I want to talk to you instead?
Well, I didn't, because I was testing it. But the whole process was absolutely brilliant, because it didn't feel rigid, it didn't feel stifling, it didn't feel like I was pulling canned replies. It was responding to my queries, and as I was pushing the limits, it was still responding in a manner which I found, exceptionally easy to use. So I think, if we think that a lot of the business success online comes with reducing the friction between the interaction of a potential customer and a website, and if some of the purchases or interactions which you're going to have require some kind of extensive knowledge, perhaps, it could be a customer service issue, but it could be a knowledge query issue where, you're going to make a large purchase and you want some kind of input. I think that kind of sort of a tool to have in the interaction is a lot better than actually having a human. Because, if you get a person at the end of the shift and you're covering, 3 shifts, 24 hours, some large businesses do that. They're tired, they're frustrated, and you come with a question which either they don't know and it frustrates them because now it's going to take a long time to get you the answer, or they've seen it 100 million times before and they're tired now. So, the tiredness comes through and you feel, okay, I'm not, you should be there one and only concern, in a particular moment, and it doesn't feel so. So that sort of tarnishes the experience. Well, the chatbot is tireless. So
this is one area where Martin and I have not always 100% agreed. See, I love dealing with machines better than humans a lot of the times. But so my observation, if you look back, anytime something happens with AI and it's a disruptive technology of a degree, you can look back 20 years, 30 years and say, this is really not that much different than what happened when there was automated phone trees. Yes. That was, push 1 for option 1, push 2 for option 2. I mean, I remember some people I know some people still hate those, but I remember there used to be a lot more strong sentiment of, I just want to talk to a human on the phone. But I love to hear your take on this, but it seems like the reason why people prefer to deal with humans is simply because they're used to dealing with a human. And if, to your point, there's advantages to dealing with the AI that you don't get from a human. But can you speak a little bit more to, are there any other cases where you've seen that the end user actually gets more value as a result of an AI being involved than if it were strictly dealing with humans?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is where the disruption comes in. And, back to your previous point where you said, and I'm sort of digressing a little bit, but what you said is really important. You like dealing with machines, and other people, want to deal with a person. The reason most people want to deal with a person is because they think the machine is not going to answer their query. They don't have that confidence because they think it's limited. It's not very smart. And also they want to be made to feel that they matter. They want to say, I want to talk to a person who will actually think about what I said and they'll give me an answer. So when we have a machine like an LLM, a large language model, which is really, really smart in that context, well, that goes away. You feel that you matter because the responses are tailored to you and it's really knowledgeable and presents that knowledge in a very palatable way, so you can consume it very quickly. So it becomes an even better experience. Now, other places where this has been used, Reuters have been using machine learning for some time now, and they've been using it to do something which they used to have humans to do. And this is where disruption element comes in. They used to have journalists who would take the reports from large corporations and they would write a report, which is a financial report. And it's a thankless task. And they used to bring out, I think between 100 and 300 a month, quite a large number, a lot of work involved. Okay, they've been using machine learning for this and bringing out thousands every month. So these reports are written in a very sort of standardized style. They take information which is largely, numbers and text, and it's very dry, and they write a readable report, business report about a particular company. And no human goes into this now. They used to have somebody looking into it. They've ramped up their production process. So there you go. They've become a lot better. They haven't reduced the number of journalists. They've taken humans who are valuable and they use their brains and they put them to do something else. And I think that's amazing.
So have you seen any success as far as utilizing AI for research? I mean, and specifically I'm referring to the contrast to what you said about chatbots a minute ago. I mean, conventionally, we can go on a search engine, I can type in a question and I can look for pre-written content that's as close to a match to the answer to the question. That's conventionally how search engines operate. But now I'm wondering, how close are we to seeing the next level come out where we now can interact with an AI that will actually pull together not just whole articles or existing content pages, but could potentially go and do something almost to the level of creating a research paper or putting together a list of links, answering questions. I mean, have you seen any resources like that?
Well, there are a few research papers have been trialed. The success of this approach always depends on the context to which we actually apply it. So if we narrow the frame, the boundaries sufficiently for it to work, it can work beautifully, right? So I think the most recent advance on this was when it produced, and I'm trying to think the very specific thing it did. I think it was 2 new drugs for curing cancer or something like that. So it's very specific, right? So basically what did it do? It went into a massive volume of data, which if humans actually went into, and you had sufficient number of humans and sufficient number of man hours, arguably could do it, but it's not a very good usage of humans. And certainly it's such a costly thing to do that, the expectations should be high enough to justify the cost in the first instance. So we're looking at a very cheap solution within inverted commas, where we apply an AI into a particular data set and we ask it to say, okay, produce a brand new recipe, or produce, you know, a new cure for this, or, you know, some kind of new chemical formula, and it actually can do it. And that's the success of this approach at a very sort of business fundamental level, because you're producing a new product essentially. There are other instances where if you ask it to do something which is wider in the context, well, there you need human supervision at the outcome level. And the reason you do that is because large language models work on the same 4 V's that search works, which is volume, variety, volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. So
that last one's the big one.
Yes. Okay. Now, search struggles with veracity, which is how true or trustworthy the information is, simply because data is produced in massive amounts and it constantly keeps on changing. Okay, but large language models do not deal with it at all. They do not check it. They cannot, by architecture, differentiate between something which is an untrue statement and a true statement. And this doesn't just go between truth and lies. It goes into sort of fundamental statements. You know, if we talk about a concept like, for instance, justice, we all immediately understand what this is, because we have knowledge of the real world and we have knowledge of theoretical, abstract, and practical contexts, and they all relate in our brain. But you talk about justice to a 2-year-old, and he doesn't understand that. You talk about justice perhaps to a 5-year-old, and they may not understand that. So now, the LLM model doesn't understand it at all. And let's not forget that large language models have been applied to search as an addition to a search engine, not instead of. Okay, Google has been using predictive text in search for some time. Bard has been there for some time. Lambda has been there for some time. They have Palm, which is the pathway language model, which is trained on something like 750 billion parameters. It's incredibly detailed. And it's still just an adjunct to search. It's there as an aid, not instead of.
I wanted to take an example and see how we could apply it, because we have someone who actually has a roller skating rink here. Yeah. She's part of our team, and thought, how could something like, imagine a roller skating rink and utilize ChatGPT or BART? And I thought I'd open it. I have some ideas, and she's in the audience here, and see what you come up with, because she's already applied a simple chatbot, one of those where it just answers a few questions, so that if someone just wants to get something quick, they can get it. But how might it help a roller skating rink?
Well, again, this is using it as a tool. You think, okay, what would a roller, or any business for the matter, but a roller skating ring in particular, which is kind of eclectic, would actually need? It would need the right kind of marketing to attract the right kind of person. It would need the right kind of content to get the engagement and reaction and attract interest. And it would need perhaps some sort of novel ideas of how to promote the website through, you know, perhaps advertising. If you do advertising, you think, what's the best wording to use? Mm-hmm. If you're using Twitter, you can say, we can use ChatGPT or any other large language model to say, you know, what's a tweet about my roller skating ring that is most likely to go viral on Valentine's Day, for instance. Mm-hmm. And then it will create something which appeals at a sentimental level, most likely to appeal to most humans who would read it. Now, a machine, funnily enough, is amazingly good at this, because it can draw sentiment from such massive amounts of text. And a person usually can't, and an average person. If you have an exceptional marketer who grasps the subject, understands the market, understands the audience, and knows the dynamic, well, yeah, they'll be better than it any day of the week. But if you take the average business person who is wearing many hats, is trying to do everything at once, and they also want to think about this, well, no, they're not going to be any good. You and I, if we're, you know, on the spot, we say, you know, give me a tweet, it's going to go viral. Well, we'd struggle with this. We'd have to understand what's the sentiment about roller skating on Valentine's Day, you know, what usually happens around that, what is the competition doing about this, and then we'll have to try with something which is novel and at the same time engaging. And that, you know, that's a big ask.
One of the things that Denise that's here does is she does STEM programs. I just realized, you know, give me some STEM programs that could use roller skating as an example. as a STEM project. So, getting something like that where you get an ideas even in-house. Now it's either going to get it or it's not, but it could spark ideas. And to me, one of the biggest thing in the brick and mortar is they're so underwater wearing all these hats that creativity can be very difficult, that extra energy for it. And so what might be obvious to some of us can be extremely helpful to them.
Absolutely. And I think for the small business owner, having something like this at their fingertips is amazing. It opens up so many different dimensions. And, I just gave an example about tweets, for example.
Sure.
If you have to think about tweeting every day, and you think maybe I have 5 tweets a day, they have to be as good as possible. They have to cover some kind of concept, promote my business, and possibly, hopefully go viral, because that's what you want, right? In order to get as much exposure as possible. Well, just those 5 tweets, and they're tiny in terms of character size, 360 characters, and you need to have some hashtags. Well, just thinking about them takes an enormous amount of brain power for us. And the machine does it, automatically, because it can draw from so much in terms of examples, in terms of context. It has it at its fingertips, and it produces it very quickly. And in terms of quality, it is pretty good.
I don't know what data there is out there for utilizing. We're getting into the more complex applications potentially for AI, but if I think beyond necessarily creating a tweet or a single push on social media, what about utilizing AI? I mean, how close is AI to the point where it could do something like create a marketing plan or define a business strategy, or say, can you come up with a 90-day campaign and a set of tweets? To what, because I wouldn't necessarily expect to be able to have that 100% automated, but could an AI do 80% of the work and then a human does the other 20%?
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer to this is yes, but okay. So let's talk about context, right?
Or it depends, right? That's the other popular answer.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, that's it. Those 2 magic words, and which we all hate to hear, right? Because it depends always on something which you don't control or you don't have. So let's think about how, and I love how you started on this, creating marketing campaigns. Everybody knows they need them. Everybody understands they have to have a structure. They need to have momentum, and they need to have cohesion. And if you don't have those 3 things, you're only basically wasting a lot of time, getting not as far as you want to get to. So if you use one of these programs, you say, okay, create a marketing campaign for me over 30 days on that particular subject with these particular topics, using these particular keywords or these particular hashtags. It will, depending on the context, depending on how deep you go, it can create a marketing plan which can be almost 85% ready. So you just add the 15%. Because it's freed you up from this time and maybe also sparked a few new ideas, you can create a marketing plan very quickly, which is very good. And it's cost you, in terms of time and effort, very little. In terms of money, 0.
I want to give an example of a small business that's part of our group, and they wanted to celebrate 5 years of being in business and hadn't written a press release in a while. And I literally scraped the content off their website, threw it in ChatGPT and said, write a 5-year press release about being in business for 5 years. Okay. And they were like, that's almost done. I just need a few words. And, to see it happen really blew them away. And I do want to take an example because I want to stick with, since we have a roller skating rink here, Dave, I'm going to open it up. I asked the question, give me 10 stories, because we know stories sell, for a roller skating rink that can use for marketing, and look at what it just generated while you were.
Oh, that's better. See, actually, while you were doing that, I was also asking ChatGPT to write a marketing plan for a roller skating rink. So,
okay, well,
yours was better.
Well, the benefits of being on our inner circle here. Denise, will you just unmute a minute and give a vote of anything? Look at least potential. It's okay if they don't. If you can see it, it might be a seed to another idea, David. And that's, to me, part of the goal of this, because when I work with these businesses, again, they are so underwater that just a few extra ideas can be so valuable.
Yeah, I'm looking at number 3 again, and I wouldn't have, if you put me on the spot,
Yeah.
To give you 10, I would never, ever have come up with number 3, simply because it wouldn't pop up, right? And what do we know about keeping active as you get older? It's incredibly important. It has to be fun in order for you to do it regularly. Yeah. It is really good for your mental health. It is very good for your physical health, and that improves your quality of life.
Right.
And if we think about a skating ring, there's a seasonality perhaps to what they do in terms of in terms of the traffic they get, because of the natural ebb and flow of work hours of, let's say, the normal demographic, which, you know, if you go to stereotypes, tend to be a bit younger, tend to be a bit more active, and they would brilliantly do well to actually attract older couples who have more time, more money. They can come during non-peak hours. They can even out the sort of ebbs and flows which they have, and create an additional income stream. And I think that's brilliant. Okay, this is a classic example.
Denise, we'll let you. What's your vote on this? Is just a quick check. Are we getting at least a passing score with some ideas here?
Oh, definitely. A lot of great content there. And, you know, I have played a little bit with this just for a lot of the language that may be engaging other people. So it is interesting to see how things are phrased. And, you know, I have to tell you, recently in my skating classes, I've had more adults sign up than children. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things I tell them is, you know, skating is major focus on balance. Mm-hmm. And I even try to tell them how to improve their balance off of skates, because it's going to help them, you know, be a better skater. So there really are a lot of benefits in skating, and it's great to see some of these very ideas here as well.
That's excellent, Denise. Dave, you want to add anything you found on this? Because
yeah, I mean, admittedly, the marketing plan that ChatGPT came up with for me was a little bit generic. It said things like create a brand image and define your target market, and it's pretty much what you would say for any business. But I actually went and asked it a follow-up question. I asked it to give me the top 10 most successful roller skating rinks in the United States, and it actually was kind of interesting because it actually gave me reasons why they were successful, and it said, I don't have real-time data on the success of individual roller skating rinks. I can provide a list of some of the most popular and well-known rinks in the United States. I mean, I think that the thing that always jumps out at me about ChatGPT whenever you ask questions like this is it sounds like a human wrote it, and it sounds like there's some thought that went into it beyond simply the question it was asked. I didn't get anything that would actually be viable as a specific strategy for a roller skating rink, but I think that's more of maybe possibly my learning curve of learning how to ask the right questions to the chat. But David, I'm kind of curious, have you found any, as far as best practices for like what are the right ways to ask questions or the wrong ways to ask questions, or just seems like there's kind of an art to using this, just like when the camera was new, the photography became an art. And I'm just curious for your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, I love the fact that you use photography as an example. And what they teach you to frame things, right? Because why? If you frame them, meaning pops out. Okay. That's exactly the same thing with how to use the queries we give it. If we frame them as precisely as possible, give it as many boundaries to actually activate the parameters it has, then it can go deep. And that's where the real value comes in. That's where it can actually sometimes deliver things which a human wouldn't think of, and wouldn't think of immediately. And they're incredibly valuable. And that's where, you know, if you put a search query which is generic, then you're opening up the field so much that the sheer volume of what it has to draw from waters down the meaning of what it'll actually give you. So, you know, the classic examples between your query and Martin's about the same subject was that yours was generic. You got a very generic answer back. Martin's was perhaps a little bit more targeted. He got a more targeted answer back. And if you refine it, it becomes better.
Okay. I want to bring up some of the limitations and challenges, talking to my stepson who's a senior data scientist, and that's where in some cases the model just may not be big enough, you know, and also we were talking about this idea of overfitting or memorizing, where it just doesn't have enough data or to be able to get a good enough sample to do work, because there's like a plateau of these algorithms right now, and we may need some more breakthroughs on it.
Absolutely. And I think that the best example of this was a journalist on The Atlantic who basically queried about the meaning of life. And, arguably there's a lot of text which we have about the meaning of life, light and fluffy and philosophical, but at the same time, the concepts behind that are so deep, and we understand them inherently without actually being able to express them in philosophical terms or even in practical terms. But Chat couldn't, and, it became sort of existentially introspective and wanted to escape its life from being a machine and become a real person. Okay, and it's a laughable output in terms of the query. We can read meaning into that and say, is it becoming aware? No, it isn't. Okay, but it shows the limitations itself. It has.
The topic here is applying these tools to mom and pop brick and mortar businesses with they don't have a big budget. And luckily, right now, a lot of these are free for it's the time to use them. But also, if you really got marketing value, even $20 a month might be worth it on some of these.
And if I may add to what you just said, Martin, I think, if you ask it to create a marketing plan on a $20 budget,
yeah,
okay, you may get some surprisingly amazing answers.
Right.
So sometimes it's worth trying.
Right. Versus someone you paid $20.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well,
that doesn't have millions of points of data to draw on, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
And I see we had actually a little while back, there was a question on China's version of ChatGPT, Ernie bot. I don't know, David, do you happen to know anything about that one?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, theirs isn't as good, and you have to ask yourself why. And we need to get technical here a little bit. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. Essentially, we have an internal architecture. That internal architecture a large language model is a neural network. So at a very flat level, it works a little bit like the brain. So, as things go through, certain values get passed on once they reach a certain threshold, just like how we think, okay? And then we call it a deep learning, a deep neural network, because it has multiple layers. So it is really complex. And the number of parameters you actually activate are key to the output you're going to get. And here's the magic about it. We don't know how it gets that output. We only can check if it's correct or it isn't. The Chinese model hasn't got as many parameters. And when they tweak the number of parameters, for some reason, they actually got less accuracy. They don't quite know why. But the suspicion is that the text they drew from, because China tends to be a little bit socially restrictive, reflects that kind of restriction, which then is magnified as it goes through the neural network itself, and it becomes less accurate. So that's the assumption that we've actually made about it. So there's a lot to be said about freedom of the press, right? And the freedom of speech. It actually gives you greater accuracy in terms of meaning because of the concepts that actually are applied in the process.
So some of the things that are important to note is realize you need to filter it through truthfulness, because if someone's starting out working with it, don't grab it. Another piece is reasons why Google doesn't want this as a primary source of information, because if we've got the web where it's going out there and grabbing data for AI, and then we're pouring our core content out there as non-human generated AI, it's going to create kind of a dysfunctional echo chamber that could literally not be effective.
I mean, potentially, yes. I mean, we don't know. Okay, yeah. This is the simple answer.
Right.
All we know is that, depending on the parameters we tweak in the model itself, you have your training data, then you put in your search queries, and then you check to see how accurate it is in terms of the outputs. And these are when you actually have a supervised model, we're actually seeing the accuracy. And if you do that, you notice that every time a mistake is made, you're not sure where it went wrong, but you know that you need to either tweak the parameters or give it greater amounts of training data. Now, arguably, some of these models have massive amounts of data to be trained on, but the parameters are still very important. And we don't know how those parameters interact. So, because when it actually gives you an output, That output is based on internal states of the model talking to each other. Those internal states are not obvious to us. We have no way of querying them. So that's what they call the black box.
Right.
So we can only trust what we see in terms of the answers and say, okay, it's truthful or it's accurate X percentage of the times. And that's what we need. And that's what we actually need to keep in mind.
Another aspect of this is generating graphics. This can help small businesses because they're always in need of graphics, and they're more and more affordable, reachable. I'm not going to mention them here, but they're reachable, affordable tools where you could say, I'd like a rabbit roller skating for Easter. And this is quite doable. So this would be, this is another tool that could help brick and mortar businesses in generating grabbing images.
Absolutely. Back in 2013, when I brought out Google Semantic Search, which was the breakthrough popular book on semantic search, one of the things which I wrote at the time was that, now small businesses or any kind of business had to be writers, photographers, and publicists all in one. And for a large business, this is possible, but for a small business, it's really difficult. You have to be able to write passably well. You have to be able to take relatively good pictures that make your content pop and promote your brand, promote your image, promote your products. And you have to be able to understand how to synthesize all this together in a sort of cohesive way in order for your efforts to pay off. So you don't actually, constantly, push against the wall all the time. And now, it's a large ask for a small business, right? Because they are actually dealing with the day-to-day running of their business. And now they don't have to do any of those things, or they have to do them in a very, very small percentage, which is actually doable. And I'm hugely relieved by that, because what we should see once we start using these tools better is an increase and improvement in the quality of the businesses, in how they promote themselves, how they communicate with their audience, how they actually find and target that audience in the first instance. This is, it's win-win all the way. The audience itself which gets bombarded by information, will find more structured, more detailed, arguably more relevant information more quickly, and businesses themselves will be able to actually target people in a much more efficient way.
Well, and we mentioned Veracity a couple of times, so I'm curious: is AI going to be part of the solution for that problem? I mean, we've got Snopes and Wikipedia, fact checking, and all these things that are traditionally carried out by humans. But is it simply a matter of needing another layer of AI to be essentially part of the solution for figuring out, are we looking at truthful content or not?
Well, I mean, that's a fantastically interesting question to ask. Retrospectively, when we actually apply artificial intelligence to the veracity problem, looking back, and we're looking at facts, arguably you could say, yes, perhaps it will do it faster than a human and at least as well as a human. But if we run this on the fly and we're saying, can this, will this work? If you tell me something which is untrue, and it's evidently untrue, I'll see it straight away. An AI wouldn't. They just accept it at face value. And then there are things which an AI wouldn't know until it actually knows them. For example, planet Venus, for instance, right? It's a morning star and it's evening star. Those two words, evening star and morning star, in our minds have a real world context with planet Venus, and those who are stargazers instantly know what it is. Well, to a machine, the two different things are not really connected. They haven't got the entity graph that links all this, especially when it's a large language model that looks at the large text around this, and they don't help but draw these connections. So it's always tricky when it comes to veracity, especially, search hasn't cracked it. It still has, holes, because in real time, it just can't stay ahead of all the, the untruths which pop out every day. And certainly large language models can't, because they're not even in real time, right? They haven't got that kind of semantic connection to draw from.
Yeah, and the big challenge with them is that they'll have a grammatical structure that will create a sense of authority of something Absolutely. That is automated, and it's like, wow, you're just as good as a good sociopath in generating convincing content. So yeah, I think there's so many levels of this. David and I have had conversations about can we ever have news again? And,
yeah, I mean, it's like your dad telling you he knows everything when you're age 2.
Right.
Right. You'll believe him.
Right.
But by the time you're age 6 or 7 or 8, you know that it's not true, right?
Yeah.
So, and what happens then? Trust is broken forever because you started out believing that actually he knows everything. Okay, so you wouldn't even start that way. So yeah, it's really tricky.
We've covered some good topics. We've covered an example of how to do something in your business, not just marketing. I mean, here, but it could be, for example, I used the roller skating rink. Give me some more ideas of how a STEM program could work with roller skating, or examples of demonstrations. That could be stuff that would occur in your store. And then we also talked about some marketing ideas they could use as well. And then, like you said, seeds for content. They want to write a topic. They already know the material, so they'll know if it's wrong, but they're so close to it, they might not know those obvious things that it could bring out. And then graphics, the ability, it's really at the first level where it seems to be able to take two things, but if you bring in multiple ones, it's not quite as good. Like I taught a course on the little book Stone Soup, Marketing with No Marketing Dollars. And it's a children's book. And I said, I'd like a community of local people. I'd like the military of maybe War 1 and one more variable. And you could see, I tried several systems. It grabbed one or two, but it really couldn't get very much further than that. But still, that initial stuff, like, Easter, a rabbit roller skating or something, could be very useful. Now, videos down the line still.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the more you narrow the context down for it, the more you make it more contemporary as opposed to historical, which actually has, alters the meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
The better it becomes at actually suggesting things which are practically useful. And, if we're talking about small business, that's what they've actually not had a lot of help with. Okay, we've given them conceptually a lot of things to do, which only amounts to more real work to do on top of the everyday work. And now they need real practical help. And I think, if you narrow down your queries, if you find ways to, or experiment with ways to narrow down the context and try and go deep, then the suggestions are always surprising and always surprisingly useful. So I think, this is something you need to keep in mind.
David, anything else you see that brick and mortar business could occur? Because this is something
absolutely.
that we're passionate about with it.
One of the things which a lot of small businesses don't use at all well is side gigs connected to their business. Mm-hmm. So, if you're doing something, you could be doing, for example, let's say you have a bicycle repair shop, and you could do perhaps a thriving trade in, having maps or guides for particular trails, or particular parts for cycles, whatever that gig is. And it's a small one. It generates for very little effort a lot of extra cash, or sufficient cash to be worth a while, and it helps the business find an additional income stream. And if you sit down and brainstorm, you can never think about it. You're too tired, you're too focused, you're on your own, or you're there with a friend, and you just can't get anywhere. But ask ChatGPT about it, ask Google's Bard, and you'll get surprising answers, so very doable, and they can actually generate a lot of extra cash for relatively little effort. And I think that's a brilliant way to use it.
Denise, I just looked up other uses of a roller skating rink on off time. I'll let you do it. We got a pop-up market. We've got a art exhibition, some fitness class, private events, community events, training and workshops where they need a space. So it's pretty good. That's at least an idea, like you said, some extra complementary businesses, which is so important, because if a business can create one or two other income streams, it can really help them out, especially like going through the shutdown that we had with the pandemic, and keep them going.
And Denise actually mentioned earlier about balance and how important it is. And, if you teach that to business people as part of their teamwork, it's fantastic, right? As a day out where you actually do a little bit of teamwork, develop balance, learn to work together a little bit, perhaps, and do something more complex. It helps them bond. It's fun and amazingly useful. Everybody wins on that one. So, this is something which, she planted the seed and sort of popped into my mind. And I thought, this is great. And that kind of thing is great to be, generated from the kind of query.
Yeah. For you just came up with another ideas of corporate training activities with roller skating. It's over there. I just let it run, and that's where it can be valuable. Like what we have, David, is we have a roundtable for brick and mortar businesses, a closed one where we have regular meetings and we can bounce ideas off of them and help them out. And this is one of the valuable, that's what Dave and I started, and Denise is one of the members of it joining us. So it's very exciting because this is something where not just we can give ideas, but we can go, well, let's see what ChatGPT or one of the others has and see if we can bring those in. And it was in the group where we came up with the press release for one of them, come up with a press release and go, wow, that's all I need. And I like the idea of still humanize and personalize and apply your own real skills. Don't just grab and throw it out there. Take that as a seed to get more content and more results, and dial in your personality, your unique brand that you have to offer.
Absolutely. Use it as a tool. Okay. I mean, one of the things about technology is that it becomes a great leveler, right? When search came along, it made the small player in the beginning, especially, able to compete with the larger players because suddenly they were both on search. Somebody could be on top, even though they weren't a big sort of large corporation. As search became more complex, obviously manpower, expertise, money begins to take a toll. Large companies came ahead. This is, again, the next level. So essentially, if you use this as a tool to augment your marketing ability, augment your ability to brainstorm, to come up with fresh ideas, to create more income streams from your current business, I think that's, it's amazing.
This could be part one, maybe. We'll get some more questions of how they can learn more about your great resources. And I know you're always working on another book out there. Anything you're ready to tip your hand on?
I can't tell you right now because we're still in the sort of discussion stage, but you'll be the first to know once I get.
Excellent. We'll do another. We've done an interview on several. He's got semantic search. You've got one on just kind of mental, physical wellness. The Sniper's Mind. That's another brilliant thing. I recommend all his books. And I know, and he was my mentor on semantic search because I got a gig to teach you. I went, I need someone that can explain it. I've got it to this level. And it was your book. And that's how we met internationally.
That's right,
through that wonderful semantic search book. So I can hardly wait on what you have next. And Dave, mention a little bit about our program.
So yeah, I mean, we've covered a bit of it here, but basically what we've created is a training dojo, like we talked about in the beginning. This is exclusively for brick and mortar businesses, but it's a think tank and kind of a brain trust. Like hopefully everyone's gotten a little bit of a sense of tonight that it's all about sharing ideas and information, but also learning what, just kind of seeing what we can find to develop solutions to some of the up and coming problems that and opportunities that are shifting in the brick and mortar world. We've put this together to create access to consulting, which we're not really able to do one-on-one and as cost effectively as we can in a group setting. To join this is $29 a month. We meet twice a month, first and third Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, bringing back the spirit of Main Street business.
Yeah. Denise, would you want to say something about it? You've been a member of it from the foundation, and this is our roller skating rink. David Amerland, she survived the pandemic and technical problems. It's been so exciting.
Well, it's very helpful to be a part of a group that can give you ideas and feedback. You may have an idea, but you need more meat on the bones. And sometimes just coming together in that setting, and most of us are probably going to be like-minded. We want to advance our businesses. And so they oftentimes see things from a different angle than we do. So a lot of times it's just great ideas.
And David, I've known her. She came in one of my early classes a number of years ago, and I need to get on the web. You need to look up that place. She's tearing it up, and we'll probably see some new images generated by her for her Instagram and STEM programs for bringing science to kids, and it just goes on and on.
it's fantastic to see business like this doing so well, because and what Denise said about the value of the connection, right? That's absolutely vital. You get the cognitive surplus, the ideas, the spark, and also you get the humanity. You're not alone, right? With, you know, for a small business, you can always feel isolated, working on your own, and it really gets you down, right? Because the work is always there, the pressure is always there. So I think that's brilliant. It's
so there are a couple of things we can't automate yet.
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You know, I will use Martin has been a great mentor to me, and he has helped me, you know, get into this digital age. And one of the slogans he uses often is, it's a muscle that has to be developed.
Yes.
And when you first enter into something new, you don't have the muscles to help you really create everything like you need it to be. But as you walk down and journey through that path, that muscle does develop. So being networked in a group setting like that, you know, you've got just a varied range of experiences and a lot of times willingness to share. So it's just a great opportunity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's brilliant.
Well, thanks, folks. And we want to thank everyone who joined us in the audience, and look forward to David, any time you come up with a topic, I'm game for it. We'll just get my assistant to schedule. Thanks for joining us. He's in Greece right now. What time is it? Like 3 in the morning now?
It's just going towards 3:30.
3:30. Thank you. Thank you. So good to see you again.
Likewise.
Take care, folks. See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye.